This is Kelly again, and now we're going to do an unoccupied bed change. So our patient's already gotten cleaned up, dressed, and they're off to activities. So now it's time to get that room clean. With the bed changes, we change the linen every time on shower days. So twice a week our residents go to showers and we change all of the linen on shower days. And depending on where you work, you will need to find out your facility's policy of whether you change linens every day, or most facilities nowadays are only changing necessary linen as needed, and then twice a week they do all of it. So we're gonna go get our linens to start with, and we will come to the linen cart. We have clean hands when we get into the linen cart and no gloves on in the linen cart. So we're going to get our linens the way we want them. We want our fitted sheet. If we're going to put a draw sheet underneath them, we'll put a draw sheet, waterproof pad, top sheet, and our new bedspread, and pillowcase. And it's always nice to know how many pillows your patient had in that room. And we cover the linen cart back up. We carry linens away from us. So we're going to come back into our patient's room. We're going to make sure we put these, I just flip them over right here, and they should be in the order of how I need them. So when I take the dirty linen off, I always want to have gloves on. And I want to have a place to put my dirty linen. So some of the facilities have soiled linen hampers in the rooms. Some of the facilities have bags in the room where you just put your dirty linen in a bag. Some of them, you have to put the dirty linen hamper right outside your door, and you would just carry it and take it there. But when I deal with the dirty linen, you always have gloves on. So I'm going to put my gloves on. And I'm going to raise the bed up to a good working height for me. Again, always kind of, we want to make sure we don't tilt that table over by... You want to get in the habit of raising the bed up when you're doing things. You always have to remember to put it down when you're done, but it will save your back. So I've seen many nurses go out on back injuries because they are always working over a low bed and working over rails. So I am going to take off my dirty linen. Now, as far as me reaching across the bed, or if after just telling you about good body mechanics, again, I'm tall, I have a long arm reach, I can usually pull that fairly well without straining my back. But if you're shorter, you're gonna you're gonna take all the linen off on this side and then come around to the other side. Now, when I take dirty linen off, when I do an occupied bed, it all tends to come off in a clump. But when I do an unoccupied bed, I try to just take off each piece individually. And you roll the pieces away from you, so if there's anything on them, you don't get them flicked up on you. So let's just go ahead and let's loosen that, and then we'll come around to this side. And we'll loosen this one. And this one here, I can actually put both rails down because my patient's not in bed. Now, what I like to do is, you don't have to do this, but it's just nice for the next, for when all this stuff goes down to laundry, is I try to roll this individually. Excuse me. I try not to just roll in one big lump if I can help it, only because then the next person who gets the laundry in the laundry room, they've got to sit there and try to sort it and pull it all apart. And it really isn't that big of a deal when the patient's not in bed to just roll the pieces individually. It just makes it easier for the next person. Occupied bed change, I don't worry about it. So now all of this is going to go straight into my soiled linen hamper or into my bag. So we'll say this is my soiled linen hamper. Excuse me. Okay, so now I can go ahead and take my gloves off. Now, the only time for an unoccupied bed change, I don't need gloves on to put my clean linen on, unless the person was an isolation patient, then I would still have gloves on. So I'm gonna go ahead and put these in the garbage, and I will hand sanitize. Where's my hand sanitizer? Sorry about this. Walk back in front of the camera. Hand sanitize again. And there's hand sanitizer in the room when we work with the patient, so you will be using it a lot. Hand sanitizer, you always make sure you rub it all over your hands and you keep rubbing until it's dry. Okay, so now we're ready to start our clean linen. Now, if the bed is soiled, if let's say the person had been incontinent and there was blood or there was bowel movement or there was something on the bed, that the mattress was really soiled, you would actually go get housekeeping, and housekeeping would come and clean the mattress, and you'd have to wait for it to dry before you put your clean linens on. So we're going to go ahead and now again, as far as reaching across that bed, a lot of that will depend on your height and your arm length, so we can go ahead and a draw sheet. Not all places use draw sheets anymore, but even if they do not use a draw sheet, do not hesitate to take a sheet and fold it in half and make your own draw sheet if you have a heavy patient or a patient who is dead weight. A dead weight patient, you always want a draw sheet, and a draw sheet should go from shoulder to mid thigh. Sometimes I see some of the CNAs, excuse me, sometimes I see some of the CNAs just fold this up into a little square and put it right underneath the waterproof pad, and that doesn't do you a bit of good. That's just a waste of linen. So if you're going to use a draw sheet, use it correctly. I'm going to tuck in the sides, and then I can go ahead and put my waterproof pad. So now I can come around to the other side again. I like to try to pull this tight. And if you do make yourself a draw sheet, the part where it's folded and it's folded over like this, make that down here. Make sure the seam is up here so they don't separating it as they're tossing and turning. All right. So now we'll put our top sheet on. So a bed is always much easier to make if the patient's out of the room or out of the bed. So if your patient's going to be getting up at any point, that's a good time to do it. As far as which side goes where, you're looking on the seam. You want the soft seam. We've got a little lip right here where it's sewn, and here it's smooth. The smooth part is going to go against their skin. And again, if that's the worst thing you do in nursing is don't put the soft side against the person's skin, you'll be fine. So usually when these are folded, there's a middle seam, and you try to get the middle seam in the middle, and we'll give you equal amounts on both sides. But I also just kind of like to check and make sure it looks like I have about the same amount on each side. And I want to pull it down enough that I have enough room to tuck it in. Okay. And then we're going to do our bedspread. And so I don't know if you noticed this, but I just dropped my pillowcase. There is no 5-second rule in nursing. So if something hits the floor, and I know you guys all know what I mean by a 5-second rule, especially if you have kids. First kid, you sanitized everything when you dropped it. Second kid, you just stuck it back in their mouth like a pacifier. Anytime you drop something in nursing, it is off limits. So that has to go in the soiled linen hamper, which means I now have to make another trip to the linen cart to get another pillowcase. So I'm going to go ahead and all right. And this one doesn't really have a seam, so before I start tucking anything in again, I like to just make sure it looks like I have about the same amount on each side. That looks okay. I'm going to fold this over. Now, we'll talk about that in just a sec. Okay, so now we're going to tuck this in. So when we tuck this in, I take my sheet and my blanket, and I'm going to come and I'm going to tuck this in. Now I have my sheet and my blanket, and I hold this out, and I'm going to fold this up. So I'm making kind of a triangle right here. And now this part here is going to get all tucked in. And now when this comes down, it's gonna give you what we call a hospital corner or a mitered corner. Now, I frequently have students come into Skills Lab, they're like, I have to work on my corners, I have to work on my corners. Please don't. Most of the facilities have gone over to bedspreads that have sewn in corners now. This is great, but it's a nicety. It's not an infection control issue, a safety issue, or a dignity issue. So if that is not the perfect mitered corner, it is not gonna hurt anybody, okay? There are other things that would be more important to practice. So over here, I will do the same thing. Now, okay, so with this bed, it depends what's going to happen. If my patient is going to get back into bed, I'm going to actually fan fold this back. And what I mean by fan folding is I can bring this back. So when they get back into bed, they can just reach down here and pull their covers up on them. If they're not going to get back into bed, and usually in the nursing home, we try to encourage our patients to stay up out of bed for a while. Some of the CNAs like to leave the bed like this. Some of them will actually, I made that a little short to do that, but we'll actually cover up the pillow. So that's really just personal preference of the CNA. It's not anything that you have to do. So let me go get another pillowcase since I dropped my one. This would now go in with the dirty linens. And I have to make a trip back to the linen cart. So that's why you always want to try to make sure you grab what you need the first time around. Try not to drop things as you go along. Happens, but it just means extra steps. And believe me, you will be taking plenty of steps. Now the pillowcase, the seam goes in towards the seam here in the pillowcase. I can grab it here and bring it up. Or I can fold this, but we don't shake things. We don't stick it under our chin and shake it into the pillowcase. So now we can put our rails back up. We can make sure our call light's where we know where it's going to be when we're done. Bed's going to go back down in low position. Even though our patient's not in it, we're going to make sure our bed's back in low position. I didn't need to pull the privacy curtain for this. I'm going to make sure this is, not going to be in anyone's way. And now, one thing I want to mention here is let's look at this bedspread here. So this bedspread is kind of long once I have this bed all the way down in low position, but it's not touching. Now, in a hospital setting, we would leave it like this. If our patient's not in bed, we put the bed down in low position, we actually leave it like this. But what you're going to see in the nursing home is a lot of the CNAs will tuck it in. They will go ahead and just tuck in all of this while they're out of bed, just so it doesn't hit the floor, just so it looks neater, I guess would be the best word for it. And that's just personal preference. So whether you leave it long or whether you tuck it in is up to you. But when the patient is in bed, once you have a patient in bed, you do not tuck the sides all the way up like that. That would be considered a restraint. It's only tucked in when they're out of bed, if you want it to, if that's how you want it. You are welcome to leave it long, okay, the way I had it before. And that's it, we're all done with our bed change.